Sorry, I'm gonna get this before I'm done being chair. I promise. Do I need to make a motion to start the meeting?
Is there a quorum?
We are all here.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing everybody. My bad.
So Chair Gamache, you just call the meeting to order and then you move to the first item on the agenda.
All right.
No motions to start it.
Okay, sorry. All right, I call this meeting to order then. And looks like we are all here and present, so we have a full quorum. Moves us to number 3 on the agenda. Any additions or modifications to this agenda today? I'm not seeing anything, so it moves us on to the public forum. Thank you everyone that signed up to speak. I believe Executive Assistant Trammell will call you to speak, and we have 2 minutes per person. So take it away, Shannon.
Okay, great. Let me just see here. The first one I have is Danielle Shaw, followed by Jean Markey. So, Danielle, are you there?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So my name is Danielle Shaw. I've been a Ward 2 resident for the past 5 years. And I guess tonight I want the police commission and all law enforcement officers here tonight to know how disturbing it is to see you push to return to business as usual just weeks and days after hundreds of Burlington residents participated in public forums, in multiple meetings to let you know that they don't feel safe and that it matters to them that their neighbors don't feel safe. I'm not sure if Deputy Chief Murad is in this meeting tonight. If he is, I'm speaking directly to him. If not, I hope that his colleagues will let him know that I listened to his presentation during last night's city council meeting and was profoundly disturbed by the politicking he displayed. His presentations and his comments showed either a willful misunderstanding of or an inability to listen to the conversation that this community is having about public safety. And neither of those are characteristics that I want in law enforcement officials. I'd like to use the rest of my time as a moment of reflection for the commission members who aren't already working with the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance and law enforcement officials to think about the next life that will be destroyed or were stolen by the BPD, and why you aren't willing to do everything in your power to prevent that from happening.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up is Jean Markey, and I apologize, Jean, the last part of your name was cut off, filed by Elisa Galvez. So Jean, is that you?
Yes, that's me.
Perfect, thanks.
I'm Jean Markey Duncan. I'm a Ward 4 resident. And I did want to share 2 of my experiences that I've had over the years that led me to believe that racism is alive and well, unfortunately, in the Burlington Police Department. I don't know how endemic it is, but certainly it exists. And I'm a white female, 47 years living in Burlington. And I am committed to change so that all citizens in Burlington can feel equally protected and served by whatever form of public safety takes in the future. I want to take my lead from those who have been most affected, while at the same time recognizing that all of us are needed to get this right. I want to hear from police officers who are open to transformation and not just reformation. And so I'm going to skip my experiences that I was going to tell you about. And I'll just jump to the things I've been thinking about recently, which is the role of police unions and also the police academy. So it seems to me that on what is going on and to look into the future, these two institutions could potentially play a positive role with the appropriate mission and leadership. In general, I would say I'm a union supporter, but I absolutely hate what some unions have become in recent years. At one point in our history, workers were considered to be the best who were union workers. My father-in-law, for instance, was the leader of the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers in Vermont. Being a union member meant something to him, and he was proud of that membership. The best part of the union for him was that he could mentor and train apprentice bricklayers. I think this is an important role for unions. It would be unheard of for his union to think their role was about protecting substandard bricklayers. My father-in-law always made the point that when you hired a union bricklayer, you could be sure you were hiring a highly skilled worker. Today, though, I think of certain unions when I think of certain unions, my view is not so rosy. And police unions have notoriously been in the business of protecting bad officers instead of helping them find new careers. In doing so, the union has served to undermine all police officers. Could unions play a positive role in the future? Honestly, I don't really know. It seems to me that Burlington Police Officers Association needs to begin a process of some serious soul searching so that they can decide what side of history they want to be on. The public has a role in questioning what the unions are doing and how what they do impacts the community. As far as the police academy goes, I don't know what they teach, but what they need to include, in my opinion, is a lengthy segment on the history of racism in America, including on what foundation policing was built on in the first place. Some deep reading and follow-up classroom discussion led by experienced individuals might help change the culture of policing. There are many good reads. White Fragility, The New Jim Crow, you all know them, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and others. You can't read one of these and not be transformed, and transformation is what is needed. And I thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Next up, we have Elisa Galvez, filed by Sierra Urich. Elisa, I am unable to identify you. Sierra, you did just email me. I'm unable to identify you as well. Dana Keys Gibbons. Dana, are you there?
Hi, I am.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Dana Keys Gibbons. I'm a resident of Ward 8, and I'm calling to express my concern that officers Carew, Campbell, and Bellavance are still on the police force. That's absolutely ridiculous. And I was also really concerned by the tweet implying that cutting the police force by 30% would somehow decrease the diversity on the police force. Well, the first 3 officers to go are already clear, and the other officers who go should be determined by who else has histories of abuse or accusations of abuse. And Burlington needs to prepare to transition into a world where we don't use police to address our problems, because we do need to abolish the police and invest in the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. So next up is Sylvia Knight, filed by Andrea Coles. Sylvia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. My comments start with some feelings about Jennifer Morrison's order of 6-1 regarding the duty to report corruption and misconduct. I don't find that order particularly reassuring because having learned about the well, I'll just say quickly that police culture has been one of protection from and avoidance of accountability. The training emphasizes control and violence and de-emphasizes interpersonal skills. Police language and video cams is vulgar, disrespectful, and violent, and shows a scorn for the people the police are dealing with. And the union prevents change and accountability. I'm afraid I'm just really terribly worried. I think I see that weapons and maneuvers of deadly force are all too available at any moment. I know that what has happened in Burlington recently in the last couple of years could lead to death. The brutality by cops costs all of us. How are we going to stop the unwarranted pain and trauma caused by officers that are sworn to protect us? Just whom are they protecting? Further deaths and violence and injury by police is not an option anymore. I'm asking what actions can be taken to prevent ongoing violence by some violence-prone police who tend to injure and act aggressively with people. So what measures can we take after all the discussion we've had and what we've seen elsewhere? I'm just really concerned and worried about the safety of my Black brothers and sisters here in Burlington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Sierra, I do see you here now. So I'm gonna unmute you there. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm a non-Black person of color living in Burlington, Ward 6. I wanted to speak up today to stand with the demands made by the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. I am emphatically in support of defunding the BPD by 30%, the first cuts of which should come from the salaries, overtime, and benefits of abusive officers. Bellavance, Coro, Campbell, I think we all know their names pretty well by now. I also wanted to call attention to a recent tweet by the BPD posted last Friday, June 19th. It says, and I quote, 30% cut would mean firing our most recent, most diverse hires. It erases 20 years of progressively improving community policing and engagement. It sends us back to reactive 9/11 driven policing. It would be a disservice to our neighbors and make BTV less safe. It's unacceptable that the BPD is threatening to fire minorities from their department if they face defunding. At best, this is flagrantly tone deaf, and at worst, a racially based threat of retaliation. I'm not sure why the department even has a Twitter account or who's getting paid to run it. I generally support unions. I heard someone else say that on here, but I do not support this one. The police union is founded in racism, and to weaponize their seniority rule during this national civil rights movement when our brown and black citizens in this very community have been explicitly harmed is more than entirely missing the point. It's underlining the problem. Police officers should be hired and kept based on merit, not how long they've participated in a broken system. The union's antiquated rules are designed to keep officers in power despite abusive actions, and this is even more reason for our community to push forward with a 30% cut and reallocating those funds into non-punitive, community-based systems of public safety that protect and serve the lives of all our residents. I'd encourage you guys to take a look at this tweet yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra. Andrea, I apologize. Andrea Coles, followed by Holly Bosley. Andrea. I am unable to identify you, Andrea. Holly Bosley. I see a Holly, but it's not the same last name. Holly Bosley, I'm unable to identify you. Phil Tremblay. Phil, are you there? You may have to unmute yourself on your end.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Got me now?
Yes.
We got you.
All right. Hi, and thank you for your time. My name is Phil Tremblay. I'm a current police officer for the city of Burlington. I would like to take a minute just to offer my perspective on the issue of defunding the police, specifically by 30%, as it was recently suggested. Keep in mind, I'm speaking for myself and myself only. My thoughts do not represent the Burlington Police Department. So first off, I fear that the city council doesn't recognize the long-term ramifications of some of the recent suggestions. I fear that it's short-sighted. From inside the police department, I see our highest quality officers greeting this recent proposal by looking for alternative police jobs. That's leaving the city of Burlington. So our city will lose 30% of its police personnel, and then it will lose an additional number of officers who would have been a strong leadership for the department in the future. So these officers have lived their entire police careers based on the community policing model that Burlingtonians should be proud of, and that's a huge loss for the entire community. So not only will the current state of the PD suffer tremendously as an organization, but the future also. So try convincing a young recruit to work for a city whose recent proposals suggest that they do not believe in or support their police department. The top tier recruits will go elsewhere, will leave the city of Burlington, and what we'll have is second and third tier officers. Now, second and third tier officers currently don't make it through field training at the Burlington Police Department as of right now. We're extremely lucky to have such skilled women and men working for us. If we go down this path, the quality of police work and ultimately the citizens of Burlington, they're the ones that suffer. As I have throughout my career with BPD, I continue to be open to change, but I don't think that this is the appropriate action. Finally, a little bit about myself as I feel it's relevant to this conversation. I've served the city of Burlington for almost 9 years as an officer. Prior to that time, I had a family member who served the city for nearly 25 years. He served as even the chief of police at BPD. So to say that I have pride in being a Burlington police officer is an understatement. Throughout my career, I've had no problem looking at fellow officers, looking at them in the eye and saying that they'd be crazy to leave a department with such a strong history and such a strong future to look forward to. I still feel that pride when I'm doing my job on a day-to-day basis. But when I read about some of the recent impulsive proposals regarding BPD, including suggestions by the city council, I find that I need to remind myself more and more about that pride as it gets slowly buried beneath the politics of it. And that should concern everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Next up, we have Emma, I apologize, Soapcheck. Emma, I am unable to identify you. Alan Gladstone. Sorry, I try to search I am unable to identify you as well, Alan. Alexandra Seiler, Alexandra. I am also unable to identify you as well. I had someone contact me, RGFB. I'm unsure who that is. Jessica Chadwell. I see just a Jessica. Is this you? Jessica just contacted me.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. I
Okay,
apologize.
perfect. No, that's all right. Thank you. My name is Jessica Chadwell. I've lived in Burlington for about a year, and I wanted to echo concerns expressed by those before me. The people are calling for change. This starts immediately with firing and charging Coro, Campbell, and Bellavance. BPD has blatantly disregarded the call of the community. At the protest organized in Battery Park this last Saturday, Councilwoman Zariah Hightower directly asked Deputy Police Chief Murad if he would meet the demands of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance when passed by City Council. To this, Murad, he responded, "Which demands? This is unacceptable. The public is calling on BPD to do your job. To ignore the people now would be a grave mistake. Thank you."
Thank you, Jessica. I'm just going to take one quick look here. I see a hand. Carrie Crosby. Carrie, are you there?
I'm here.
Perfect.
So I've lived in Burlington my whole life. And so I have a pretty good perspective of what the city's gone through and what it's going through right now. And I think the 30% cut in the police force will just be detrimental to people.
Oh. Carrie, sorry.
There we go.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry, that was
Sorry, can you start it over again, please?
Yeah, I've lived here in the city my whole life. So I have a pretty good idea of the history of the city and what it's going through right now. And I'm in a neighborhood where we're pretty close to downtown. So, but as time has gone on, especially in the last few years, I've actually seen a rise in crime, along with the drug addiction. You had to be careful then not to step on needles. And so I don't think that is going to change with a reduction in the police force. Sure, there needs to be reforms, but a 30% cut would just be too much, in my opinion. And this is the first time I've been to a Zoom meeting, so it's kind of like gone under the radar. You know, I'm used to attending, in-person meetings. So then I found out, what this whole little movement is about, and there seems to be a lot of parroting about actually, cutting the police force, even doing away with the police force. And I noticed in 7 days, they have in their article, and during the protest, we have signs like white Americans are the biggest threat in America. To me, that smacks of racism. Then we have stop giving bigots badges. And then I'm gonna kill her name. It's someone threatened she was gonna burn down the police station. I don't call those peaceful demonstration. And they actually did pull down the American flag and put the Black Lives Matter flag up, and then they defaced the police station with graffiti. So, and now they're protesting at the mayor's personal residence, where I think should be completely off. But so I think that would be very unwise to cut the budget. And I've worked with a lot of decent people of color. Then I've met some not decent people of color. And I shouldn't be judged by that at all. If you're a criminal, you're a criminal. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Hold on just one second. Okay, back to Andrea Coles. Are you there, Andrea?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I just want to, my name's Andrea. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white resident of Ward 5, and I just want to say that I don't think that the cops make Burlington safer. I don't think that cops make anywhere safer. I want to see Burlington working towards having a cop-free community, and I think that we should be moving in that direction. I want to take the remainder of my time as a moment of silence for Tony McDade, a Black trans man who was murdered by the police in Florida.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea. I have up next James Martucci. I did just see you here.
Hi, Shannon. Can you hear
Hey,
me?
yes.
Great. I just want to respond a little bit to the second to most previous speaker. I do believe that the police do fill a function in our community currently that is it is truly intrinsic to the well-being of our community. However, it is not because of the organization itself. It's because other services, let's talk about healthcare, let's talk about social services, let's talk about the mental health organizations in our communities that have been defunded systematically over the last 50 years. And let's consider for a moment that the police are being put under a burden that they are not equipped and have never been equipped to deal with. This is not a part of training. This is not a part of infrastructure or policy. This is a part of a serious lack in our government that needs to be it needs to be addressed in a more in a, let's say, holistic way. We need to approach this problem without focusing on simply cutting the police, because this is something that's going to occur over a long period of time. It's not about creating immediate and inextricable change. It's about implementing a long-standing change. Reallocation is the key word. It is not defunding, it is reallocation. You take the money that you are slowly siphoning away from the militarized equipment of our department, which is of course you need certain types of equipment to do your job. I understand that. However, I don't believe that assault rifles and explosives are necessary for most of your calls. And so hence, I would just like to say that the slow defunding of the police is more equivalent to a reallocation of funds to social services that have been defunded over time. And that will create the change that everyone is looking for in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next up, Ben Gordorsky. Did just email me, Ben. I am unable to identify you, Ben. Will Gebhard. Will, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Got you.
Sweet. So yeah, also to talk to the guy who just called in about worrying about a 30% reduction in the budget of that. I would echo the guy who just spoke before me with, it's not, just defunding and seeing where the chips fall, it's reallocating that money into social services, which, I mean, again, you don't expect change to happen overnight, and there might be some bumps along the way, but that's how change goes. And then in response to the officer who called in, Phil Tremblay, I think, it kind of is really disheartening to me to hear that the response of officers to a potential, budget cut, instead of saying, oh, okay, I'm in this job because I want to serve my community and I want to, provide my community with whatever I can do, instead of saying, all right, so what can I transition to? What social work can I do to help my community to basically, meet the same end goal? Their response would be to move to another space where they can continue to work in this position of a police officer. So this power hungry position. That shows, I think, a lack of an open-mindedness that the current, and again, he says he speaks for himself, so maybe that's not trying to push this on the entire department, but if he's saying that a majority of people, or even a decent contingent of people within the department are sort of presenting this as an option, it shows a lack of critical thinking maybe about ways in which their current job could be better handled by different positions. I think that speaks to it speaks to a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Andy Sebrnik. Andy. I see one Andy. Is this you? I appreciate the pronunciation. Hopefully I didn't do too bad.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Thank you. You did my last name just fine.
Okay, good.
I want to just, a lot of the points have already been made. Anyway, my name is Andy. I'm a white resident of Ward 2. I work in healthcare here. I guess I just want to say what's disheartening to hear as a reaction from the police department when the idea of getting cuts to their budget is put out there is that their immediate reaction is to leave the community that they've been trying to protect. I hear a similar reaction when there are calls for rent control or things like that, and the people who, or whatever it is, the people who do make a lot of money want to just leave the community. I believe that working in healthcare, you really do see the compassion in your community. We are underfunded, understaffed. Every day is really hard. And yet I have a lot of love for my community and I want to make it safe. I want to make sure that people are being taken care of. I don't believe that anybody whose reaction is to leave their community is coming from a place of love for that community. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Ronald Bellevue, do you still wish to speak? I had seen your hand.
I'm
Sorry,
here.
I tried watching hands as well, so.
I'm here.
Perfect.
Okay. Before this
conference was opened up on the phone. I just did some quick research on Burlington as a city, and anybody can do this, so I'm not making these facts up. But I'm referring to the crime rate in Burlington as being considerably higher than other comparison communities. And according to FBI, Burlington has a crime rate that is higher than 93% of the state's cities and towns of all sizes. The crime index, according to the FBI, is 21, 100 being the safest that a community can be rated. It's more likely that you would become a victim of a crime in Burlington, almost twice as likely than any other locations in Vermont. And that's both violent crime and property crime. And I listened to some of the other comments of people calling in, and one fundamental thing sort of troubles me a bit. A is people want to identify themselves with their race, which I don't think is relevant. And secondly, is basically people who are naming officers in terms of officers who have already been through a process of investigation and found in terms of whether guilty or not guilty. But basically, it's in violation of our basic inherent American rights, and that is that you are innocent until proven guilty. And it seems that there's a neglect for that basic right in some of these comments, and it is a bit troubling. I am not in favor of defunding the police. If anything, I'm in favor of escalating funds for police. And I'd like to know what the city government and the police chiefs, the leaders in the department, I'd just like to know what their plan is to try and deal with making Burlington a safer place. I'm just working on the other side of that coin. And the other thing is, my last comment, I like to see officers go home at night. I used to be a police officer myself, 25 years, and maybe my bias is showing a little bit in some of my comments, but I like to see them go home at night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Next up, Ben Grodorski. Let me just find here. Okay, I think I got you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Great. Yes, I wanted to, I agree with a lot of the comments people have made about the officers, 3 officers who do need to be fired, and the reducing of the funding for the police force as it exists now. I think that what we need is a major transition, not just, clearly from the last speakers, what his facts that he brought out, it seems that policing isn't really working. If we have a lot of crime and we have all these police, the underlying issues are not being dealt with. In addition to the training of police, which this is not saying anything bad about the police, the police officers. They're fine, great people, but the training combined with centuries in everyone who's white has this in their mind of what Black people are like, that's misguided, just lends this to be a bad situation. The transition is a big one, just like a lot of us might agree that we need to transition away from coal and to cleaner energy sources. The people who have been mining coal for decades are all great people. They do great work, but it's just that they need a different job because what they do, we can see, really isn't good for the world. Well, I think that there's a small need for conventional policing in the case of armed criminals. But beyond that, I think there'd be so much more potential in using that money for dealing with social problems, dealing with drug addiction, instead of making illegal, or addictive drugs rather illegal. We should have a vast program to help people get unaddicted. And The last thing I'll say is I've lived in the Old North End for 21 years now, and I just don't see the crime here. I walk a lot. I don't see needles on the sidewalks. I don't feel that threatened by things. I mean, I am a white guy, but yeah, that's my take on it. I think that we really need to work on the underlying issues and not have people called in to try and bandage up any problems by looking for people breaking laws and trying to arrest them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Ryan Miller, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
I guess I just want to echo what other people have said about firing the 3 police officers that have exercised excess force. And then I would also like to take a minute to bring up the point that defunding does not just mean taking the money away, but reallocating it, as the previous speaker said, to mental health care providers and people that are actually trained in helping people with addiction and other drug related and mental health issues. I guess I'd like to take the rest of my time for Breonna Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I have 2 further to circle back around here. Emma, are you there, Emma?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for circling back around. I would like to echo my what the points that have been made before about defunding the police with the eventual goal to abolish it. I think it's really important. And listening to the caller who said that he thought we needed to increase funding for the police department, I really think that an approach like that, leaning into the idea that the times that we're living through require more of a force that isn't working rather than less, and a different approach, really underestimates and underserves not just the public, but also the police officers that we're talking about. We all know that there are really good people in the police force, and we all know that those people deserve to have lives even after the police are defunded and abolished. And we do a disservice to those people in assuming that they couldn't or wouldn't want to reinvest and reallocate their time and energy, just like we would be reinvesting and reallocating funds from the police department's budget into their own communities. It saddens me that we pigeonhole cops into, the fact that they do go home at night, they take off their badge, and they have lives and hobbies and families outside of their jobs. And if we when we defund the police and when we find a system that works better, I want to see those same people given many, many, many different options to continue their career in serving their community. And I hope that we can think that far ahead when we're talking about things like defunding the police. It's not an ultimatum that means there's no future for those people. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And the final one I see here to circle back to is Holly Bosley. Holly, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you.
As Emma said, I really appreciate you circling back. I had some technical difficulties logging on. I was at the last police commissioners meeting, and I asked some very straightforward questions about, you know, what was our police commission going to do to help dismantle. The exact question was, what steps can be taken to create a standard and expectation for police to emotionally regulate instead of act from a place of hurt pride, knowing their shield will protect them more than they protect the community. And from the whole thing that I said at the last police commissioners meeting, I have not been acknowledged or received an email. And while I appreciate the holding of this public forum, I'm a little frustrated as to what is supposed to come of this, given that I had direct questions that were not answered and I wasn't given a response to these questions either publicly through the rest of the meeting. I'm not sure if they are going to be addressed today. I also want to say that I spoke before I was educated enough, and I did advocate for more training on the dismantling of like white supremacy within, you know, the police, which operates to enforce that white supremacy. And I just want to retract that and say that I would prefer for defunding the police and for funding groups that already dismantle white supremacy. All of the things that have been brought by the VT Justice, Racial Justice Alliance Center towards City Council. There are a lot of things with a lot of information from a lot of people who have been doing a lot more work for a lot longer than I have. And I just hope that the police commission will listen to those people, as well as getting back and responding to me as a citizen who pays taxes that fund the paychecks for the people in the police department when I have specific, explicit questions that deserve to be answered to. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just take one final look at two people here that I am unable to identify, Alan and Alexandra. Those are all on the list, and then some.
Did see one hand go up after you said that was all on the list.
Grace.
Hi, Shannon. I sent you an email. I'm not sure if you got it. I would love to make a comment if that's possible.
Go right ahead.
So I just wanted to thank Chair Gamache and to thank Shannon. My name is Grace File. I'm a white resident of Ward 2 in Burlington, and I've lived here for 5 years. I want to once again voice my support for the demands of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. It's critical that you immediately discharge violent and abusive officers, including Joseph Coro, Corey Campbell, and Jason Bellavance. And just to address the officer who spoke earlier, of course, police officers are going to be leaving if they think the police department is going to be defunded. We pay Corey Campbell $63,000 a year. Jason Bellavance makes $90,000 a year. Joseph Coro makes $81,000 a year. It's my understanding that the tweet that was published on Friday is based on the police union contract, which is public information. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time to read from that contract. It says in the contract that higher level infractions may result in discipline such as education, training, verbal or written performance counseling or coaching, referrals to coaching, written reprimand, reassignment, dismissal, and suspension. And I don't understand how that's appropriate. If I show up for my job late to make lattes, I might also receive written reprimand.
I also want to point out something else in the contract that seems very problematic to me. Personnel files. So if someone is disciplined or suspended, it's my understanding from reading this contract, those files are only kept for a maximum of 3 years. And I invite any, I don't know if any law enforcement is listening, I invite everyone who is listening to answer these questions. Tell me why and how this helps protect us, the citizens. It seems like this whole contract, and we know this, is set up to protect the police officers at the risk of the citizens. Like, we absolutely know that this is true, and this is very clear. And I just wanted to send this message that we are all paying attention. We are all listening. And when the contract comes up for renewal, we are going to demand that there are reforms and there are provisions in this contract that we find acceptable. And we are not going to stop until this happens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. I apologize for missing you before. Okay, I don't see any other hands, and I just did a final check on my email, so I don't see anything else.
All right then. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for commenting. We shall move on to agenda item number 5, Chief's report.
Chairman?
Sorry.
Can I have a moment just to acknowledge the public comment?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I want to say that since we've been doing this over this last year, that there are certain commissioners, and this is to those who've commented. This is to the general public. There are upwards of 50 folks or so that are watching, and I think it's very important. First of all, to say thank you, as the chairman has expressed, but also want to just acknowledge you and let you know that I hear you. I want to let you know that also there's some new blood on the council. Some of us have been finding our sea legs. I think it's also very important to communicate that there is a structure that they've placed us within, and I think that in hindsight, and as I was listening to you, Holly, and to you, Grace, and some of the things that you were saying, I think it's really important that we as commissioners do acknowledge you. I'm going to do a better job at reaching out directly to some of you. If you can find my email address on the website. But I think that their point is really, I want to make sure that folks are knowing that they're heard. And I think that we as commissioners, it's really important that what we're doing is interacting, responding, and building that conduit into these communities and making sure that we're at least acknowledging what they're saying to us and acting upon some of the things that they're saying to us. So that's the first thing I just wanted to just put out there, because I think it's really important that folks are, it's not just okay to just come up and talk, but to know that they're being heard and that we are being responsive to the things. I think what that leads to is that we also, I think you must also understand as general public that there's a limitation to the things that we can do, to the things that you can say. There are limitations to how we operate in terms of the contract that you spoke about, and other factors that are on the back end that affect our ability to take action on some of these things, as much as some of us would probably like to. And then finally, I would just say that on the day that Rayshard Brooks has been laid to rest in Atlanta, I think it's very important as we talk about what it is that we're faced with these demands across the city and across the nation, that we understand this conversation about policing to be a part of a larger conversation, a part of a conversation that speaks to police having its roots in the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, and acknowledging the ways that it serves to largely protect white people and their property and adversely impact communities through over-policing communities of color. which is a fact, which we have data on. Disproportionate traffic stops, a fact. Targeted community policing, a fact. Disproportionate contact with African Americans, all documented in our communities and in our schools, documented. Reports out of the yin-yang, all resulting in disproportionate arrests, disproportionate uses of force, disproportionate incarcerations, causing long-lasting damage on Black and brown people in our communities, consisting of and not limited to physical, emotional, social, economic damage to these communities. So I want to acknowledge that as a commissioner, and I want to tie that to our conversation that we're having on policing and its impact on that. I want to make sure that it's very well understood for those who are watching that is the foundation of a lot of this conversation that has been happening. And I think it's unfair to sit around and have a conversation about policing without having a conversation about why that is. And it's also short-sighted not to acknowledge the fact that we are talking about doing that so we can get policing off the neck of Black and brown people, while at the same time redirecting resources into communities to economically empower these communities, and at the same time provide them equal opportunity and access as well to equity across these communities. So that is the larger conversation that needs to be had, that nobody seems to be able to get at. But policing is only a very small part of the conversation. So I hope that as we're having these conversations, we can get folks to stop being so short-sighted and look beyond what it is that we're talking about in terms of policing and look at the larger picture. And now I would ask you once more just to take about 5 or 10 seconds and just give Rayshard Brooks a little bit of space. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Moving on to agenda item number 5, the Chief's report. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. It has been a very busy couple of weeks. I don't have much of a report per se. I have information, certainly shared a lot of information last night with the City Council with regard to our staffing, with regard to how our budget works. I think there is, and I'd be happy to share that with this body as well, although I think that we've got a pretty full agenda and there really isn't time for that. But there are, a lot of implications to the 30% budget cuts that are being proposed. And I think we can discuss that at a later point. With regard to other things, we had a really, I was able to participate in a really successful event on this past Saturday about the Black perspective, organized by 4 young men and a young woman from Burlington who put it together, really ran it really well. A long march on a very hot day around a good portion of the Old North End and downtown border. But it was a terrific event, successful, certainly from their perspective. I think they got what they wanted from it in the sense of getting a lot of good attendance and being able to share stories and lessons. And I'm happy to say that that went off well insofar as public safety is concerned too. And other than that, we've had it's been a busy time as the heat's picked up. A couple large car crashes that took up most of our day yesterday. We've had some additional incidents as the weather changes and more people are out and about. But I'm really ready to move into the rest of the agenda. So I apologize for having a relatively truncated Chief's report today.
Understood. Thank you. Moving on to agenda number 6 for fiscal year 21 budget discussion. Back at you. So I'm sorry. I believe this was a point from sorry, the agenda lists this as being one of your points you want to talk about. Are you?
Me, yeah. Mr. Chair? Yes, thank you. So yes, the budget. I think that the commission knows that the budget was presented by the mayor a week ago now. And that was a fiscal year 21 budget for the city of Burlington that includes a 10% cut to the Burlington Police Department. And these cuts were determined during several weeks of evaluation in response to revenue shortfalls that the city expects to experience owing to COVID-19. Every city agency is sharing the sacrifice of similar cuts, although the BPDs are greater. And 10% cuts for us mean that we lose 12 unfilled positions. That not only means that the BPD can't grow, but it also drastically reduces our ability to prevent attrition by leaving no buffer for replacement officers. And for the most part, Vermont police departments can only hire twice a year owing to the academy schedule. And so while every now and then there's a lateral officer, not being able to hire for this coming academy loses that buffer, just the natural attrition of whether it's retirements or people find other opportunities. So the mayor's budget also contains uniform, equipment, and office supply cuts, as well as about a 70% cut to our training budget. And these cuts put the BPD on the razor's edge of being able to maintain our current level of service. And but I think that they're predicated on an epidemic that requested shared sacrifice of all of us. Obviously, recently, there have been very different calls for budget cuts, calls that have been for 30%. And those cuts, if enacted precipitously, and I think there's discussion about how to do that, would ultimately require laying off about 18 officers in addition to those 12 unfilled spots. And much has been made about a tweet, but that tweet is predicated on the existing contract, which is seniority based, as is every municipal contract in the country. The BPD would be reduced from its current sworn headcount of 91, which is where we are right now. It's 90 effective because one of those is a long-term sick, to approximately 75 sworn officers. And there would be probably important non-sworn positions that might be lost under such budget cuts as well. The cohort of the officers who are our most recent hires, and again, seniority rules in the union says that the bulk of any cuts would come from that most recent hire cohort. They are among our more diverse officers. We've been able to change hiring, especially along gender lines, over the past several years. They're also, some of our best trained officers, in as much as they have been trained in ways that this department has pioneered over the past several years for de-escalation, for deceleration, for different modes of engagement that prioritize engagement and education rather than enforcement. So, 30% cuts are significant. And ultimately, they lead to one of two solutions at the moment, and they're possibilities. There are other options available depending on how these cuts would be implemented or the degree of the cuts. But if it was 30 and it was precipitous, we would end up either having our emergency staffing kick in, which is required by contract, and that emergency staffing is a rotational shift and chart that has no room for the specialty roles that have been developed over the past several years, including community affairs, the domestic violence prevention officer, our emergency response officer. It shrinks detectives to a minimum, to 10, and it puts the other resources in a rotational shift on the road that probably would cause not only a return to a more response-oriented, 911-oriented policing, rather than a proactive community policing, but might also incur additional departures because it's not a chart, I think, a schedule that officers are going to find conducive and popular. So that is one. And then, another, and this would be subject to union agreement, but another option would be to end our overnight coverage and have the city not have overnight coverage. And this is simply a math issue with, if you go from 90 officers to 75, there are places where you have to draw back. And so it's either the emergency staffing chart or it is the something like an ending of overnight midnight coverage. All of these things need to be considered in the true context of what our staffing really is. And that was a large component of the presentation that was done for the city council. And that includes the fact that what we have is, I said 90 officers, and that's accurate. But of those 90 officers, 8 are deployed at the airport, and that's mandated by the FAA. And there are a number of people in there. We have supervisors, we have detectives. All of those resources end up shrinking, and the call volumes are important here. And I'm sorry that I didn't get these slides better presented and ready for you. But what we've seen over the past several years with call volume is that our calls are have dropped quite a bit. They've dropped many percentages, 23% over the past several years. And that's a good thing. That's indicative of a stable city. That's indicative of a city where people are safe. The bulk of that call drop, however, comes in something that we call type 1 calls. And type 1 calls are calls that are quality of life oriented. They are service oriented. They are not necessarily about the immediate needs of a person's safety, but they are very important to our residents. We've seen calls decrease. Most of the call volume decrease came
Point of
from.
order.
Yes.
Is this a budget conversation or is this an existential conversation? I mean, if you're here to tell us about the budget, I would like to hear about the budget. But you got a lot of airtime last night. If there's a question if there's something that we're talking about the budget, I'd like to hear it. But if we're going to have this conversation, this is not appropriate.
So, in my opinion, this is about the budget, in that the budget is our staffing.
That's your opinion, Chief. But what I'm saying is what I'd like to hear is the budget. Okay, now if what you're doing is you're going way off the left field, and I heard this presentation, and I'm sure half of Burlington did last night. Can you stay to the budget, please? Please.
So I don't believe that half of Burlington heard it last night. I think there were about 20 people on that call on the Zoom.
Can you stay to the budget, please?
And the issue is that the budget is people. For an agency such as ours, our headcount is our budget. And talking about what that headcount really is talking about what our budget does and what our budget is. So we have a budget that is predicated on staffing. And I am outlining how that staffing works. There's no room in the rest of it.
About the cuts that you were just talking about, what it was actually rooted in, it was a 35% cut in uniform officers. And as a part of this transition, the police commission was going to be vested the authority to oversee a fully operational and functional departmental assessment. That would also be a review and analysis of it would be with full community participation. And there would be a conversation of, input would be gathered from the community to gain, some idea about the shifting policing focuses on what, who, and where, and how policing was being done. So the way you're framing this conversation, you sounded like it was some kind of draconian 30% across the board cut. I think with a 30%, if my math is correct, 30.5 from 105 to 73, that assessment at the same time and that analysis at the same time to refocus how we do policing, it's a whole nother conversation. Because what we're doing is we're transitioning the department to deliver services that are aligned with the values and the vision of the community.
So I specified that I'm talking about if those cuts were made precipitously. And I'm outlining what those cuts mean if they are precipitous.
Nobody suggested they would be.
New information, and you'd like to try to inject that information, then
I have the additional information.
But Mr. Chair?
No, I was going to say, just finish your thought. Sorry, finish your thought, please.
The issue at hand is the staffing, and the staffing is the budget. Those two things are inextricable from one another. I'm explaining what the staffing currently does, and I'm talking about the call volume and the ways in which calls are, dictate staffing.
which would
Now,
change.
those calls
we
are
change
still
the way
going to come in. Those calls will keep coming no matter what. And if we do not have staffing, or if we change the ways, the types of things to which we respond, someone has to answer those calls. The idea of evaluating what calls come in, the idea of evaluating whether or not alternative services can be created that are viable replacements for what police do, that is an attractive idea, and it's one that ultimately I'm supportive of. But the idea of a 30% cut that is attached to this year's budget, when does that cut occur? And if it does, ultimately it requires staffing cuts. That is the only way it can be obtained, unless there's a forestall on it.
A 30% cut on this year's budget. I don't think any of the councilors are talking about, and it certainly wasn't a part of the conversation in a 2-hour meeting with the mayor yesterday.
I'm not privy to that meeting.
Nobody's talking about it. I mean, it's false narrative to suggest that any of the councilors or the mayor are suggesting an immediate 30% cut. It's just not happening in conversation right now, John.
It has been a tremendously loud demand, and for me not to address it would be remiss on the behalf of the people that work for this department.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
Our staffing numbers, our call volume numbers, what we have seen is that in call type 1, that is where the decreases come. And that has come largely because of changes in emphasis by the Burlington Police Department about how it enforces, that it prioritizes engagement over enforcement. In call type 2, which is disturbances and disorderly behavior, behavior that does have an implication for people's safety, we in fact have seen an increase in that. We've seen an increase that is in that was centered primarily in Church Street and disorder downtown, particularly around City Hall Park in the 2018 to 2019 year. And we met that with enforcement that we had drawn down on but brought back. These are indicative of roles that police have and that police services are producing results, for which police services are producing results. But if there are changes in that, we're going to see inability to deal with some of these issues. So I think that there is a lot to be said about the idea that we also have calls that can potentially be addressed by partners. However, the notion of how to make that kind of change is very important. And that, frankly, was my rationale for requesting a discussion of the budget, Mr. Chair. Deputy Chief Sullivan, did you have something to add to that?
No, I'm sorry, I did not.
I can distribute this document to the body at a later point. It was distributed to the city council last night, and I can continue to bring it up. But the notion of the budget and the degree to which the commission wants to address that or to understand it was my rationale for having it put on the agenda.
We have no authority on the budget.
That is so, but there is nevertheless an important voice from members of the community who are the representatives of the community in how, with an input into how the police department operates.
Thank you, John. Commissioner Ash, I saw your hand up before.
Yeah, it seems like the most important thing that we need to do are the most important thing are the questions that we ask. And what from my perspective, we've been hearing a lot from the community. We know we need to change. I think that, Commissioner Hughes, when he responded to the community, I appreciated what you said, Mark, about this is not just policing. This is actually a bigger issue. So for me, when I'm looking at this, it's really, I think when we look at the budget first, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We need to look about what we need. Maybe it's a 5% decrease. Maybe it's a 50% decrease. Maybe it's a 30% increase because we're going to be shifting resources and doing things differently. I think the bigger question is not what do we cut and what does that mean, but what do we want to look like? What needs to change? And then how do we fund what needs to change? How do we fund the vision, the future, is a much more meaningful conversation right now, so that we're not just being reactionary, but we're being visionary. We're like saying, this is how the this is what the change needs to look like. And I've heard a lot of really good ideas. I've heard a lot of really heartfelt and just like what's going to create meaningful change. And for me personally, I think we need to get away from, we just need to cut this. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more. I don't know. But what's the vision? What's the conversation? What do we want it to look like? That's where I think the police commission can add value. And then when we put the vision out, what do the funds look like? You know, what is that? Do some of them get redistributed? How many police officers do we really need for this vision, for this new reality of policing in Burlington? Those are harder conversations to have. It's easier just to say cut 30%, but that doesn't get us to an outcome. I think that I think people are really wanting. So that's my 2 cents on the topic.
Thank you, Commissioner Ash. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 7, wellness. This was put on here by Commissioner Hughes. Take it away.
You know what I'm really concerned about as it pertains to our uniform officers in this time where, you know, today, you know, they're under more pressure than they probably have ever been under. This is true. I mean, I'm looking at it again as an African American who's in the middle in the United States of a double pandemic with systemic racism and the COVID crisis. But at the same time, I'm cognizant enough to be able to look beyond myself and the people that are really crying out across this nation and impacting change. I heard a conversation, a statement earlier, and I think it might have been Phil who said it. And Phil, thank you for your service. Is that, you know, folks are saying if they can't like hang out here and do what they're doing without feeling like their job's threatened, they're going to go somewhere else. The truth is it's almost not important where you go because you're going to face almost the same thing because this is global, okay? And that's stressful because this is their job. And some people even, you know, these are like folks who come from families of law enforcement officers, folks who have experienced, you know, like Phil, 9 years of service, many 10, 20, have been traumatized in different ways, have experienced trauma rather. And I know that we had, help me out, John, your psychologist with the department, what's his name?
I believe you mean Sonny Provetto?
Sonny. So we've talked to Sonny before, and Sonny came and made a cameo appearance, and we talked to him, and it was good. It was a great interaction. I'd like to have wellness on the agenda on a regular basis. I'd like it to be a standing agenda item. And I'd like to understand, you know, what those challenges are and find out what we can do as a commission. I know it's a little bit of a pivot and it's probably freaking some of y'all out, but it's true because, you know, we're all people and we need to take care of each other. And the most valuable resource this department has is their people, okay? So I think it's our job, actually. It's one of our responsibilities, in fact, and I think it should be something that is codified even in charter or maybe at least delegated by the city council to us to have that responsibility and have that accountability to make sure that we're seeing about our people. Of the year or so and a half, and I'm open to your comments and I'll just rest it here for a minute, but of the year or so that I've been a commissioner, the only time I've really had much interaction with officers is like during our meetings in the room. We might get the lieutenant and maybe the data person that comes in. And then I think, Phil, you're the first one ever that has actually addressed, to me, I don't know if anybody else experienced this. I want to hear more from officers, and I also want to know more about what their challenges are. And I don't know what the union has to say about that. And it's another conversation, but y'all ought to be on the agenda too. Yeah, I know you're watching. You should be on the agenda on a regular basis as well. If we're going to do this, everybody show themselves. Let's come together and have some conversations. Let's take care of officers. let's do this thing together. So I'm open to your thoughts about that if there's any discussion, but that's really the only thing I wanted to share is I think wellness ought to be high at the top of the list on our conversation every single time we come together.
Commissioner Ash.
Mark, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that, it's been an area of my life that I've been involved with. One of the ways, and I like to use the word well-being, and I think it would be great to hear from officers. We as a commission, especially in light of what's going on, the officers, to your point, Mark, have to be involved in this solution. And I think it behooves us to make sure that we create that psychological safety. People don't talk, people don't feel well if they are not given the space, the psychological safety space to be able to do that. And I think it's important to create that so that we do have the kind of the yin and the yang. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this unless we do it together and as a whole. And I think Commissioner Hughes, you made some really good points. I do think it behooves the commission to make sure that we create that psychological safety space so that officers can be part of the solution here. So thank you.
If there's no comment, I yield back to the chair. I just wanted to just get that in because it's been something that keeps coming back.
No, I agree with that. I would enjoy, obviously, if they wanted to come out to have a slot every meeting for any officer that wanted to come with us. Yeah, with just general thoughts on wellness. I agree with that.
If I might add, if I don't know there's some kind of consent or whether there's a vote or anything like that. But I think it's just as simple as just asking you, Mr. Chair, is can we have that? Can we please have that as a standing item as a standing agenda item? And maybe what we can do is at least have a holding place where we can come back and have a conversation, revisit the conversation, and maybe John, you could be a part of the formative process and what that looks like. It could be whether it's just a report out or whether there's just a conversation or whether there's something that we can just offer in construction of what a wellness program looks like. But I just would like to have it on the agenda so we can just keep talking about it if that's possible and if my colleagues would agree.
Could I just get a little bit more clarity on what it is that you're asking for? So are you asking for information of a particular kind? Or are you asking just to have a discussion in every meeting? I'm just not sure. Yeah.
Commissioner Harp, I don't really know what I'm asking for. That's kind of part of the point. What I'm really asking for is a spot on the agenda as a holding point, as a kind of a holding place for us to come back, initially at least, to come back to this conversation on a monthly basis, so it could be a part of a formative process, so we can develop some kind of ongoing activity to that point of wellness. So the direct answer to your question is I don't know what it looks like, but I think together we can find it.
So,
Commissioner Herjavec.
Sorry, Commissioner Herjavec.
Yeah, this is a different point, and I just want to address it because I found it concerning. The gentleman that spoke earlier, I believe his name is Phil. He's an officer. I found that troubling that he will come and said that by having a 30% cut, that it would drive a good police officers away from the Burlington. And the reason I found it troubling is that if Phil really have the time to come and voice that opinion here, right, knowing that for sure that the whole organization was found on racism, and if those so-called good officers are willing to leave the city because we want to change, that means that they don't deserve to be here. And I just want to let you know that, Phil, if you are not going to be part of the people that helping trying to make changes within Burlington, perhaps we don't need those officers here. Because regardless, we are going to make changes, and whether we do by 30% cut are not, we are going to change. And those so-called good officers, if they want to go, let them go. I just want to address that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chairman.
Commissioner Nipper.
Sorry, Mark, do you want to go first?
Piggyback on what Commissioner Herzog. I'm sorry?
You can go, sir. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Landon, I didn't see you. I've been talking a lot. You go, buddy. Come on, man.
No. Go in.
Get in there.
I was just going to say that it's been brought up before in the public discussion, but that a lot of people just didn't feel safe coming to the meetings. Obviously, it's online, so it's a little bit different. So perhaps we should look at how, if we're going to include the officers more in the discussion, then how we should still try to maintain that like safety for regular people to come in.
I was going to say that Mr. Chair, that the whole transformational point that Commissioner Herzog made is so important in this discussion, because I think everybody, again, nobody really, well, very few people are focusing on the fact that, you got Black and brown people that are being impacted in all the aforementioned ways that I brought up, which is really the impetus of the whole Racial Justice Alliance's gig there, all of their demands. That's really where they're coming from. And in all of the ways that we collect information that indicates this and validates it on a daily basis, whether it's use of force that's at 22% for our department. That is all use of force of our department. 22% of it is against Black people, okay? And most of that is having a gun pointed at them. So we're not having the conversation of, well, if that doesn't stop, we don't want to live here. Huh? What we're saying is change it. Let's transform this. We want to be we want to be change agents, not folks who just are going to go on a hiatus because, well, police are pointing guns at us. So I want to just echo what the commissioner said, but pivot back to the whole point of wellness, because that was my agenda item. And I wanted to just go back to that and say that in response to Commissioner Harp's question is that I thought it would be something that we could just at least put a holding spot on the agenda, and we could come back and have those conversations, because I think that those folks who do serve us, and as they are in the capacity in which they are serving us, they deserve our concern and they deserve our support.
I am in agreement. Do I hear a motion to put wellness on the agenda from here on out going forward?
I'll move that.
And I second that motion. So vote is to put wellness on the agenda moving forward as a standing item. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Quick point of discussion. Quick point of discussion. Just wondering how this is superior to our usual way of setting agendas. I mean, I just worry about putting something, a recurring item on the agenda if it's not clear what is going to be discussed for that agenda item.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we're not really clear what we're going to discuss when the chief gives us an update. I mean, we can go down the agenda item, we can go down the agenda and talk about the items on the agenda, even the things we are clear about what we're going to discuss. We never know where that conversation is going to take us. As much as I appreciate the commissioner's concern, I don't know that in my mind that we need to have clarity on exactly what we're going to discuss surrounding the issue of wellness. I think the main point here is that we agree that we think it's important enough to hold a space for it.
I have a question. I'm not really sure what we're voting on. Are we voting on to have wellness be an agenda item and keep discussing what that looks like? So to formulate something, or are we voting on creating a space for officers to come and talk? Like, I'm a little unclear just still what we're.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, please.
So to Commissioner Ash, I would say that it would be the first. It would be the just holding a space, just holding a place rather on the agenda for us to come back and have discussions surrounding wellness and receive updates or whatever it is we determine. I did not intend it to be designed as far as the second aspect that she mentioned.
All right. Any more discussions on that? So I believe the motion is whether or not to put wellness on the agenda as a recurring item. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye in Irene's case. Sorry, all in favor, raise your hand. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Commissioner Herzog?
I'm not quite sure. Like, I'm not very clear with the whole thing, so I probably hold off for now.
All right, and Commissioner Miles?
Aye.
Yes, for the motion, or?
Yes, for the motion.
Okay, so.
Here, I think we have to do a roll.
So Chair, yes, Chair Gamache, because it's not a unanimous vote, you have to do the roll.
Roll call. Sounds
Yes.
good. Commissioner Ash, for or against? Sorry, that's 4?
4, yes.
Ash, 4. Commissioner Hart?
Abstain.
Abstain. Commissioner Hughes?
Aye. Yes.
Commissioner Hart?
In favor.
Favor. Commissioner Miles?
In favor.
In favor. Commissioner Herzog?
Then
Abstain. All right, and I am in favor. 5-4, none against, 2 abstentions. All right, moving on to agenda item number 8, President Obama's final report on the 21st century policing. This was an agenda item brought up by Commissioner Hughes. I'll let you take it away.
I move we table that discussion for now and move on to the rest of the agenda for tonight, if there's no objection.
Any objections or discussions on this point?
Second.
I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry, I seconded the motion.
Second motion, okay. Do I need to take a vote on this to skip this? Okay. Commissioner Harp seconds the motion to
Yes,
sorry.
yes, you should.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All in favor of tabling this discussion till next meeting? All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous and it passes. All right, next item, agenda number 9. 2019-2020 Annual Police Commission Report due to City Council. And this is brought up by Vice Chair Hartz.
So Chair Gamache, this was just me signaling that this is something we generally have due by the end of the month and getting it on the agenda for you. So as you know, I provided you with a copy of last year's report at your request. So happy to help in any way, but wanted to get that on the calendar.
All right, thank you. Any other, sorry, Commissioner Hughes, were you about to say something?
I was kind of laughing to myself because I appreciate Commissioner Hart's service in this area, and I'm thinking that maybe she may want to try to get some of that off her plate moving forward. I'm just glad she's still here with us.
No, actually, I offered to do it, but Chair Gamache said he'd like to do it, so I was willing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're still with us, Serene.
Awesome. Well, I have a pretty good idea of what's needed in this, and we'll come up with a draft and I'll send it out to you all, and I'll hear your comments and concerns on said draft.
And I think Ms. Trammell was pulling the data for the attendance that goes at the beginning of the report.
I do. I was holding off until after this meeting,
Yep.
so I will include this meeting and I'll send it to Chair in the first thing in the morning.
Thank you.
All right, moves on to agenda item number 10, statement of officers Bellavance, Campbell, and Carreau. And I was going to start the discussion on this, but I'm going to move this. I'm going to have, I'm going to have Eileen Blackwood, explain why I cannot talk about this right now.
So I sent you all an email earlier today that hopefully you all got a chance to look at. But the Police Commission plays a role here in the employment of officers, and in doing so, you become agents of the city. And when there is discussion about what liabilities there are around legal issues, you all are right there, because you have the ability, if an officer appeals to you from a decision of the chief about their discipline, you can, under the charter, you have to issue a written opinion and say yes or no. The discipline the chief holds stays. So you have an intimate role here in the discipline of officers, and you need to stay impartial. That means and need not to prejudge things that are not in front of you, or to make comments about officers that can be seen as negative or derogatory. One of my biggest concerns is that moving to ask officers to resign could be construed as what the legal doctrine is known as constructive discharge. It is equivalent to firing somebody, because if somebody who's in a position of authority over someone's job puts pressure on them to resign, those are the kinds of claims that come back against folks. And I laid out the legal theories here a lot more in my memo, and I can go through more of it if folks have questions about it. If we want to get into details about the individual officers, I would say we should go into executive session to discuss that.
If I may, Chair Gamache, whenever.
You're my guest.
So my understanding of the current role that the Police Commission plays in disciplinary matters holds that one of the things that the Police Commission can do, if it's concerned about any discipline which has been proposed, is elevate those concerns either to the mayor or to the press. I think there might be a tension between that role, which is laid out in the draft document that spells out the role of the Police Commission, and the role the Police Commission plays in this kind of appellate role, or this role of serving as an adjudicator of appeals at some stage in the process. In my opinion, so I mean, there are obviously questions about what sort of oversight model the Police Commission ought to play. But on my view, under the current model, if the Police Commission's primary role is to observe the process by which discipline is determined and express concerns about that process, if the Commission has concerns, to the mayor or to some other public entity, it seems to me as though that is a more important role the Commission plays than as the ultimate, appellate arbiter. And then I would suggest, if we want to keep that particular model of that particular role of the Police Commission, that the Police Commission be, that a charter change be proposed to strip the Commission of that role in hearing appeals. I'll just say, just for information's sake, on my 2 years on the Police Commission, I don't believe I've served in that. I've had to play that role in hearing an appeal once. I don't know that it's taken advantage of very often by officers for various reasons that we could discuss. I also think that short of asking for a change in the employment status of some officer, it seems as though it's also within the Commission's purview and permitted according to the legal documents that I've distributed, that the Commission can, again, weigh in publicly on whether it feels as though actions taken by officers in public domain was appropriate, even if it's not recommending for any change in employment status. That's my understanding.
I'm not sure I understood that last that last point you made, Commissioner Hart?
Sorry, yeah, no, I was just trying to suggest that it seems as though that one of the things that the commission currently can do is express concerns about either officer behavior or about whether some discipline was appropriate without recommending any specific disciplinary action be taken or any change in some employee's status. That was my statement / question.
Okay.
Anybody else questions or comments?
Yeah, a couple maybe. So what we're looking at here is we're saying that because of the commission's role in what would be the disciplinary process, and because of their relationship to the city, in their role in their status as officers of the city, that if a and I think, please help me out with this. If we're talking about, let's just say, for example, in a situation where an officer was disciplined, and after the fact that was done, and someone hypothetically were to somehow or another on this commission, or we were as a commission, would try to move that, say, for example, that officer, we would suggest that officer offer his resignation. What that would really create would be some liability, potential liability for the city, because it's equivalent to, it could be construed as being equivalent to firing, and as a result cause damage to that officer. Is that correct?
In a situation such as this,
I don't want to talk about any situations, just hypothetical.
So I can't answer that hypothetical blanket, because sometimes it would be a problem and sometimes it might be okay.
Okay. So now my question then is, how could that be so if we as a commission do not have the authority to do so, because our capacity is advisory only? We never have the ultimate say in anything, and even our advice is just that.
So what I'm saying is, because you all can go to because the police chief brings things to you, and you can say to the police chief, hey, all of us, we think the person should be fired. And you are in a position of influencing the person who makes the decision, the chief, and in deciding how do you handle that sort of a situation when it is live before you. The issue you have now is that you're talking about discipline that is not live before you. This is discipline that has been completed. It's over. And so I want to be really clear. When it is live before you, there's a lot more we can talk about what your role is. And I think that's been part of what we've been trying to hash out. How do you go about it? What can you say? What can you do when it is live in front of you?
I got it.
In this situation, I'm saying.
That makes good sense. I appreciate that, Counselor. So here's the thing, though, is from my military experience, what I understand is that there is, what's essential in terms of in leadership, as well as just in the keeping order and discipline in our department, is obviously, morale and esprit de corps, and also perception and sense of trust from community. And as a result, the understanding or the perception ultimately of even legitimacy as a result of that. And my concern is, if this is not a disciplinary conversation now, I'm talking about for the good of the department. I'm talking about for the reputation of the department. I'm talking about for the good of the morale within the department. And also to maintain that order that needs to be, that has been established and needs to be maintained in order to conduct departmental business without distraction. So from Commissioner Hughes's perspective, what I say is that we could be dealing with a situation where this recommendation has nothing to do with discipline, but it has more to do with just the morale of the department and the perception that the community has of the department and the department's ability to be trusted and also be deemed as being legitimate. And I think it's arguable that what we're dealing with here is just that. And from that perspective, Commissioner Hughes says that we've got a problem in the ranks and we should have the ability to address it. It may not be, we've never had authority to terminate anybody, but as a commission, with that being on the table, why would we not have the ability to at least ask for their resignation?
Because the law doesn't make the distinction you're making. You are still by asking for their resignation, you are saying, we want you to end your employment and with the city in a circumstance where the city can't end their employment. And so you're putting pressure on them, and that is where you get into the issues here. And again, like if you want to, I would want to go into executive session to really get into more details about this. I'm trying to make sure that you have an ability to let the public know the general issues that I'm talking about. And the general issue I'm talking about is that you can't, that a public body, public officials who have some say over whether it's by influence or by being involved in the disciplinary process, who try to put pressure on someone to leave their position, that could raise legal claims.
And just to conclude and make some space for somebody else, but I guess that kind of flies in the face of our ability to manage the good order of the department in terms of, if there is something going on in the department that we at least disapprove of or has occurred that we currently have no ability to, because everybody here knows and everybody watching knows that our power is, very, very limited, but we ought to at least be able to make a public statement if we think that something is harming the effectiveness of, if something or someone is harming the department's ability to effectively carry out its responsibilities. So in Commissioner Hughes's perspective, just on record, that dog don't hunt.
So if I could add a couple of things real quick. So one is, I think it's not entirely accurate to say that we never have a power. It's just that the power we have would be under certain circumstances, when we're actually called to render a judgment in those kinds of appeals circumstances. So that's part of the reason why I was suggesting that we might want to look at formally removing that authority that we have, if that's something which is never actually appealed to. It's never been invoked as far as I've been here. I don't think that would clear up all the things that Eileen was suggesting as far as other ways that we play a role in the process, but that would at least be one thing. And then second thing was just, it seems as though, as I suggested at the beginning, the commission can do things without making concrete recommendations about the employment of officers.
Any other questions or comments? So I did want to put this statement up to a vote, but seeing the very murky waters that might put us in, I'm willing to table this, or at least discuss it in executive session amongst us if anyone's up for that.
Is this statement not public, Mr. Chair?
I've not sent it out to the public. No, I've not.
And I would encourage you not to, please.
Well, the statement hasn't been approved by the commission, so it's not something that probably should be made public because we're not voting on it right now.
All right, then.
I move we take the statement under discussion into executive session, and let me back up on that. I guess what I'm moving is that it would be included in our executive session discussion this evening, because I think we already know that at some point or another we're going to go in that direction. So I just move. How about if we do this? I move we table it for now. To be
second table in discussion.
Back up at the time as the discussion on executive session occurs. Let me just restate that. I move that we table this statement until such time as we pick back up on the discussion on the potential executive session for this evening.
I second that.
If somebody wants to restate that better, I won't be offended.
I think we all get the gist and is clear on that. I second that motion. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
That looks unanimous. Passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item number 11. Sorry, I'm not good with Roman numerals. Reviewing the draft of the role of police. Sorry, review of the draft of the role of the commission in oversights. And we did go over this on our last proper meeting, which was June 2nd, 2020. Any discussions on the updated policy?
I think there are a number of parts that actually address what was being discussed in the previous, and this agenda item has some of those instances, especially in section 6. So hopefully, codifying that is important.
And I just want to say, I looked over all the notes from that meeting, and I think the chief did a good job of capturing all of the edits and suggestions that we had made. I didn't find anything that was remiss from our last meeting.
I move we adopt the policy as we've received it.
I second that. All in favor by show of hands or?
Do you mind if I just have a little discussion on it, Chair?
Absolutely.
So maybe I'm looking at, does yours not have highlighting in it, the version you all have, like a placeholder? Because the document I'm looking doesn't look like it's ready to be, it looks like it's got bracketed language, so.
It does. It says we need to determine what this means, and redacted or not, please see footnote on important considerations.
But then I didn't see the footnote, and I think that's my own shortcoming. Did you guys see the footnote?
I didn't see that.
You can see it? Must just be the way I brought it up. So is it ready then like this, or do we need to?
No, it's not.
Okay. I mean, we can have that discussion. I'm sorry, Ms. Trammell's trying to say something.
Sorry, I just try to, I didn't mean to step on your toes. There were some points that were brought up at the last meeting regarding this document that needed clarification from Joy, that she was going to bring back some items. And so I don't know where that is at. So the highlight was left in for that purpose. There was some discussion on that, and I'm happy to.
And I think she was going to weigh in on the final provision on the last page as well. Is that right? Okay. So Attorney Blackwood, I don't know if that happened yet.
I don't know either. I apologize. I didn't connect with her about this.
And this is
I apologize.
I withdraw that motion.
So we should try.
I will check in with her. And let me check in with her, see where we are on it, and then we can circulate you all another version.
Okay.
Thank you, Serena.
I can just send the bullet points from the meeting notes that she had.
Okay.
That she was
I'm not trying to complicate things. I just know we had some important legal we were waiting on.
Not at all. You saved me. Thank you. You're on mute.
Commissioner Hart, as far as
pardon me for a minute. I've got I just have to I have visiting family, so I'm
Oh.
going to be offline for a minute. Sorry.
Okay. Well, this was actually a clarification for her, which is that footnote is an end note, and it is there, and it simply has to do with a requirement for fingerprints and background checks prior to getting the reports, whether they are redacted or not. I mean, honestly, we do need to have the attorney weigh in on this, and Joy was the one considering it. But once you have those backgrounds and once you have a background check and the other things, redacting the personnel file doesn't entirely seem necessary based on the rules that you are beholden to, and et cetera, the protections of that foot that are contained in that end note, not footnote.
John, wasn't there some language in there that just said that everybody was just going to get cleared or something like that?
No, I mean, that's the language in that end note, and it's actually on the last page.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I heard you before.
Yeah, and it says that it just says that all people shall have that fingerprint supported background check and sign a confidentiality agreement. And again, I'm not an attorney, and we'll wait for Joy to weigh in. But my sense is that end note essentially obviates the question of whether it's redacted or not. It's almost irrelevant. But I know that we do want to have the specificity in that section. So.
All right, thank you for that, John. So I take it we will await Joy's Joy's update on that, and then I will table it till then.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to Commissioner Ash on this, because when she joined the commission 3 years ago, this was something that she really shepherded through. So thank you, Commissioner Ash.
Yeah, it's really important to have something like this so that no matter who is sitting in the seat of the chief of police, you have this structure for what it is that's shared and how it's shared. And yeah, I think this is very important for the functioning of the police commission and the relationship. So.
Chair, if I may, could I ask Attorney Blackwood if she would just address this document and the publication of it prior to it being adopted? I've had requests before and also currently now for people to kind of see what has been discussed. And since it's been numerous drafts and such, we were instructed that it's not to be put out to the public yet
And
until
if you've got a request for documents, we can talk about that offline. Well,
okay.
All right. So do I need to make a motion to table this to the next meeting then? Or do I just wait till, sorry, Chair Hart, sorry, Commissioner Hart?
I'll move to add this to the agenda for next meeting and try to make a mental note to follow up with the city attorney's office.
Second.
All in favor of this motion, raise your hand, say aye, or say yes.
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 That passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item number 12. That's commendations. And leave, Shannon, if you want to read these off, please.
You want me to read them? Last time I wasn't clear. I know the last one there was quite a lot, and so I did just scan them. There was, some thank you cards, a thank you card and letter from the residents on Ward Street, and thanking the detectives and the sergeants for their assistance there. Just some cards in general, thanking the BPD for their service, and showing the support to various officers. And then Officer Gonzalez and Officers Marvin and Ross recently on separate incidents and the way that they conducted themselves in having situational awareness and approaching and identifying and detaining a suspect regarding a bicycle theft. And Officers Marvin and Ross and their ability to help with a potential suicidal matter and the way that they conducted themselves and helped that person. I think that's all on that front.
Thank you for those, Shannon. All right, up next, agenda item number 13, commissioner updates or comments. Anybody with sorry.
If I can just address a couple of the items that were put on here just in regards to, I need some clarification. So traditionally in the past, everyone has been in a room, which I've not got to participate in yet. And you, I think, signed commissions for officers, and we've had some that have been promoted, and I don't know, should I continue to hold them, or is there, until we can get everybody's signature, does anyone have any thoughts on, and I'm just going to continue to hold those to the side. If there's any thoughts on what I should do there.
Is there a way to make them available at 1 North Ave for commissioners to, not enter a secure space, but a space where it can be made available to commissioners to sign?
Absolutely. If you'd like to, can call me, and in parking we have a window set up where we've been handing out masks, and people have been able to just pay through the window for parking needs and things. So I would be happy to come to the window with a new pen, or if you want to bring your own pen, and get signatures that way if you're willing, or again, I can continue to hold. It's just an item that I don't want to make sure gets missed and moving forward in this new way.
And is that the commission? Is the oath or something like that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, you can just, it doesn't need to be witnessed or anything, right? I mean, we could just sign it, right? You could just send it over.
Yeah, yes, exactly, Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah. So you could just send me mine, I'll do that, okay?
Perfect. And then the second item was, I just wanted to bring it up, and I had asked some thoughts about it before, and I'm only bringing it up because I don't know if it's needs to be a discussion item or not, and that is the way minutes are done. I have tried very hard to be thorough, and as the meetings get very longer and longer, and to try to capture public comment and everyone's views on that way, it's just a lot to transcribe. And so I had proposed, or would like to propose, doing a very short minute version to capture, the action items from the meeting. And then there's a computer program that can automatically take the audio and do the transcription and put that up as well. But I didn't want to just go ahead and do that. So I don't know if there's thoughts on that or discussion. I would like for them to be very thorough, and I tried to in the beginning, but it just is a lot.
I think the way that we're receiving minutes currently is fantastic. If the way that you're proposing is similar to this or an improvement, I think that's perfectly fine. But I think minutes have been great, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would think to your point, Shannon, that that they are more than perfect. I would think that they are, they're really robust minutes, and even if they were scaled back some, I would be cool with that. In fact, if it could save a little time and you could still capture the essence of what we're doing, I think I'd be cool with that, Shannon.
I appreciate that, Commissioner.
Second that as well too. Yeah, even half as much information in the minutes is still a very, very good job compared to the older one. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner Ash. I see your thumbs up. Okay, so that was that's all that I had. Thank you for clarifying and giving me a space to just ask some questions.
Not a problem, but thank you. All right, so yeah, agenda item 13.3, Commissioner updates and comments. So Anyone has anything on their chest they want to get off? Commissioner Hart.
I did it before, but this is truly Commissioner Ash's last day with us, last meeting with us. So I want to thank her for all her effort and her chairing and leading us for the last 3 years. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to just jump in there and I mean, I think this is that time.
Sorry.
So, Michelle, I really appreciate your leadership and everything you've done to just get us. You had your hands full. It's a lot of moving parts, a lot of tumultuous, just year in general, and a lot of new faces and just a lot of stuff. So I just really want to applaud you as a person and also as a leader, and for all that you've given to the commission over these years. There's been this connection. I'm sitting here with my new wife, Christine Hughes, and she remembers you as well. And so there's so much that we share with you, and we just appreciate everything that you've contributed to our lives and to this commission. So thank you, Commissioner Ash. Your name will be on a wall somewhere.
You're so kind. Well, I thank you very much. It means a lot. It really was an honor to serve. My 3 years did feel like 6 sometimes. But I learned, and I've said it before, but I really did learn a lot. And for that, I'm really grateful. You are all wonderful teachers to me. I know a lot about policing now. I know a lot more than I did before that I know I'll carry with me into other things that I do. My next thing that I'm doing is a board member of Let's Grow Kids. So now I'm working on the other end to try to make sure that all families in Vermont have affordable and high quality childcare. So we'll start at that end. So thank you. It's been an honor, and I appreciate all the wonderful, nice comments.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. All right, moving on to agenda item number 14, meeting minutes approval. Any comments or corrections to the minutes from June 2nd, 2020?
Move that we adopt the minutes.
Commissioner Hart seconds that. Any discussions on the floor? Not seeing any. All in favor of the minutes from June 2nd, 2020 as they stand, raise your hands or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. All right. Next meeting. Sorry. Sorry. All right. Next agenda item. Agenda item number 15. Next meeting agenda items.
So I gather that we're going to be talking about the 21st Century Policing Report next meeting. I would just say, and so this might come up then, but one of the things which is one of the pillars of that report is the importance of having some kind of community feedback, some kind of community survey, or some way of assessing community attitudes. So I would like to make sure that we discuss also an attempt to get some kind of survey data or other way of assessing community attitudes with an eye towards getting some, an improvement in that going forward.
Awesome. Noted here in my notes.
Yeah, President's final report on 21st century policing, as indicated by the Commissioner Hart, and the obviously the standing item that we've already approved regarding wellness, which is also a part of the President's final report on 21st century policing.
If I may, another pillar is public trust and transparency. And there is a report that will be forthcoming. It was mentioned in the Burlington Equity Report on arrest data and others. So that will be prepared too and should be on the agenda for the next meeting.
I'm sorry, John, can you restate that? What is that again?
It's just, it's a forthcoming report that was presaged in the equity report that was delivered on town meeting day in March. And that should be on the agenda because I believe it'll be prepared by then.
So the report that you're going to be presenting next month was mentioned in the equity report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I also just ask for the next meeting for, so there was a discussion prior about developing a policy that would govern when officer worn camera footage can or should be released to the public. I think that has stalled a little bit. So I'd like to know kind of where we are in having a useful policy on that.
Yeah, that is something that has not been, that we have not further developed. Frankly, I was hopeful to be able to develop it with the commission rather than bringing one to you for approval or not. So absolutely, I think that we could make that a discussion, something that is either brought, that the commission discusses, brings ideas forth for either in the next session or in the next session and another session or whatever. And then we could discuss other aspects of it in executive session as necessary. But I do think that's something that we should be looking into. And I'd had other conversations with Chairman Gamache too about mugshots and issues such as that. So those are things that we can work on, both of those. They're sort of tied in with one another, and to have something that's articulable.
Happy to do that either next meeting or a future meeting, depending on time, at Chair Gamache's discretion.
Mm-hmm. So the next agenda item is I move that we go into executive session to discuss citizen complaints and the motion we had before about talking sorry.
In a discussion on, I guess what the best way to say it would be discipline, although it's maybe another conversation.
Awesome.
So Chair Gamache, for the commission to go into executive session, you have to identify a specific statutory basis on which you are entitled to go to executive session. In this case, with these topics, I would say that you need a two-part motion. So somebody needs to first make a motion making a finding that you want to discuss personnel matters, premature disclosure of which would put the city at a disadvantage.
I move that we enter executive session.
And then once you make that once somebody says, yes, that's what we want to discuss, then you vote on that. And then you have a second motion that says, based on that finding, we want to go into executive session.
So I initially proposed that we enter executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters.
I second.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 That passes unanimously. Do I also make a motion to go into executive session for citizen complaints as well too? Or is that covered?
I think the basis on which those would be confidential would probably be because they might involve personnel matters.
Okay, then that's covered. All right. So it passed unanimously. Sorry, what comes next?
Motion adjourned.
You need to indicate whether there, other than the commission, which staff people you would like to have come into the executive session with you.
Okay. I feel like we'll need Acting Chief Murad, DC Sullivan, and Attorney Blackwood.
And then now you just go into executive session.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you're gonna have to come back and adjourn the meeting afterwards.
So we get off this link and we'll go into the next link.
Yeah, and if you're not expecting any further action, generally we suggest you say that you don't expect any further public action, and that you're intending to adjourn right from the executive session.
That's very much my plan.
Great, thank you.
All right then. Everyone that tuned in, thank you very much, and we will see you shortly. Thank you.
All right. See you in 5.